Here is the complete voiceover-ready script with Dr. Nicole Harper as the speaker. She described him to me the way people describe someone they cannot yet believe is gone. Methodical, gentle, careful about everything. Raymond was 73 years old, a retired civil engineer who had managed his blood pressure for nearly a decade with the kind of discipline most doctors wish every patient would bring to their condition. He walked 40 minutes every morning without exception. He took his medication at the same time every day. He had eliminated red meat 2 years earlier after his cardiologist raised a concern about his cholesterol. His last stress test had been, in his doctor's words, reassuring. His daughter told me he kept a notebook where he logged his blood pressure readings every morning and that in the final weeks of his life, every number in that notebook looked fine. He went to bed at 9:30 on a Tuesday evening. He told his wife he was tired. She found him at 3:45 in the morning and knew immediately that something was wrong. He was still breathing when the paramedics arrived. He did not survive the week. The cause was a massive hemorrhagic stroke, the kind that announces itself in the early morning hours without warning and without a prior event to explain it. When I reviewed everything, the medication, the history, the notebook full of normal morning readings, the answer was not in any of it. It was in the screen on the bedside table, glowing in the dark, and in the way Raymond had been using it for the last 2 hours of every evening for the past 3 years. My name is Dr. Nicole Harper, and I work with adults over 60 who are doing everything their doctors have recommended and still dying from a risk that no routine appointment has ever examined. The risk I am describing does not appear on a morning blood pressure log. It does not show up in a fasting blood draw. It operates in a specific window that most cardiologists and general practitioners have never once discussed with their patients. The pre-sleep window. The 90 minutes between the last habit of the evening and the moment the body finally descends into the cardiovascular recovery it depends on to survive long term. That window is where Raymond died. And it is where millions of adults over 60 are accumulating damage every single night while believing their condition is under control. Before we go further, if you have a diagnosed anxiety disorder, are currently on beta blockers or antidepressants that affect sleep architecture, or have been told you have severe insomnia requiring clinical management, please discuss any changes to your evening routine with your doctor first. For everyone else, what I am about to explain about what screen light, social media, and late-night news consumption do to your blood pressure and your stroke risk in the 2 hours before sleep is the conversation your evening routine has never had. You have been told that screen time before bed is bad for your sleep quality. I am telling you now that that statement is true in the context of how long it takes you to fall asleep and how rested you feel in the morning. It is specifically and measurably wrong in the context of what it does to your blood pressure, your cortisol level, and your arterial inflammation in the 90 minutes before your cardiovascular system is supposed to begin its most critical overnight recovery. The conversation about screens and sleep has always been about tiredness. It has never been about stroke risk. Those are not the same conversation. And the second one, the one about your arteries, not your sleep quality, is the one that determines whether you wake up. Stay with me through all three mechanisms, because the third one involves something that most adults over 60 do specifically to wind down before sleep, believing it is the healthy alternative to scrolling. The evidence says otherwise, and it will change what you do tonight. Mechanism 1, the blue light cortisol trigger and the blood pressure ceiling that never lowers. The screens on phones, tablets, and televisions emit light in the blue wavelength spectrum, roughly 460 to 490 nanometers. This specific wavelength is detected by photoreceptors in the eye that are directly linked to the suprachiasmatic nucleus, the region of the brain that governs the body's circadian clock. When blue light hits those receptors in the evening hours, the brain interprets it as midday sunlight. It responds by suppressing melatonin production and, critically, by maintaining cortisol levels at a daytime elevation rather than allowing the natural evening decline that the cardiovascular system depends on to initiate the nocturnal blood pressure dip. Cortisol is not merely a stress hormone. It is a direct vasoconstrictor. Elevated evening cortisol maintains arterial tone, the degree of muscular contraction in the arterial walls, at a level that prevents the blood pressure from dropping into the nocturnal dip range. In a healthy cardiovascular system, blood pressure falls 10 to 20% during sleep. That dip is the window during which arterial walls decompress, during which inflammatory repair processes activate, and during which the heart achieves a genuine reduction in workload. When cortisol remains elevated because the brain believes it is still noon, that dip does not occur. Blood pressure stays high through the night. Research published in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism confirmed that evening light exposure in the blue spectrum produced significantly elevated cortisol and melatonin suppression, persisting well into the sleeping period, with direct effects on overnight cardiovascular tone. Think of it like leaving the factory running at full production through the maintenance shutdown that was supposed to repair the equipment. The maintenance crew cannot work while the machines are running. The repairs that were scheduled for overnight do not happen. By morning, the equipment has simply run for 8 more hours without the restoration it was designed to require. Turn off all screens 90 minutes before bed tonight. Not next week, tonight. Mechanism 2. The news and social media inflammation surge. Why what you watch matters more than how long you watch it. Duration of evening screen use is damaging, but the content is a separate and compounding mechanism. News content, conflict, crisis, political tension, crime, health scares, and social media content designed by algorithmic engagement to maximize emotional activation both trigger the amygdala, the brain region responsible for threat detection and acute stress response. When the amygdala fires in the evening, it activates the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, the same hormonal cascade that cortisol travels through, and additionally triggers a surge in circulating inflammatory cytokines, interleukin-6, tumor necrosis factor alpha, C-reactive protein, within 30 to 90 minutes of the triggering content. In adults over 60 with existing arterial stiffness or plaque burden, this inflammatory surge is not trivially absorbed. Arterial plaque is stabilized by a fibrous cap. Acute inflammatory cytokine surges have been shown in research published in the journal Circulation to destabilize fibrous cap integrity, the specific mechanism that converts a stable, non-obstructive plaque into the ruptured plaque that causes a heart attack or stroke. The viewing of distressing content in the pre-sleep window does not merely raise blood pressure. It activates a biochemical cascade that can physically alter the stability of arterial plaque in the hours immediately following. Think of it like spraying a hairline crack in a dam with a pressure hose 2 hours before the water level peaks overnight. The crack was manageable. The pressure hose and the peak water level together are the conditions the crack cannot withstand. Stop watching news or scrolling social media in the last 90 minutes before sleep tonight. Not next week, tonight. I want to stop here for a moment. How many of you watch the news or check your phone in bed before you go to sleep every single night? Tell me in the comments right now. Type yes. Because the third mechanism is the one that will surprise you most. It involves something I know many of you do specifically because you have already heard that screens are bad and you switched to something you were told was healthier. Stay with me because the combination effect I am about to describe is the one that was operating in Raymond's bedroom on the night he died. Raymond's wife brought me his tablet when she came to see me. She had not known what to do with it. She showed me his recent history. He had not been watching news. He had not been on social media. He had, in fact, made exactly the switch that most wellness advice recommends. For the last 90 minutes of every evening, he had been watching true crime documentaries, long-form, slow-paced narrated content, nothing he would have described as upsetting, content that felt, in his own words, according to his wife, like winding down. His sleep tracker, a device his daughter had given him, showed that he had rarely had trouble falling asleep. His medical records included a resting heart rate log from the tracker. His average resting heart rate in the 60 minutes before sleep had been elevated above his midday baseline on the majority of nights for 18 months. His cardiologist had never seen the tracker data. No one had ever asked. His daughter asked me what would have changed if someone had explained what narrative suspense does to cortisol. I told her that the mechanism was operating every night and that it was the kind of evidence that would have changed every single one of his evenings. This video exists to give you that explanation before it becomes something a family member carries to a doctor's office afterwards. 5 rules that restore the pre-sleep cardiovascular window the evening screen habit is destroying. Rule 1. The 90-minute screen boundary is not negotiable. Set a hard stop on all screens, phone, tablet, television, 90 minutes before your intended sleep time. Not because of sleep quality, though that improves too, but because 90 minutes is the minimum clearance time required for cortisol to begin its evening decline following blue light cessation and for the parasympathetic nervous system to begin the shift that initiates the nocturnal blood pressure dip. 60 minutes is not sufficient for adults over 60 with existing hypertension. The cortisol response is slower to resolve in an older cardiovascular system. Use a phone setting, a smart plug on the television, or a simple alarm labeled "screens off" to make this automatic rather than a decision you have to make when you are already tired and already watching something. Make this change tonight. Not next week, tonight. Rule 2. Replace the screen with a specific physical transition. The screen habit is not only a blue light problem, it is a dopamine loop that the brain has associated with the transition to sleep. Removing it without replacing it creates a restlessness that drives people back to the phone within 20 minutes. Replace it with 10 minutes of slow diaphragmatic breathing, 4 counts in, 6 counts out, performed lying down with a warm compress on the chest. The extended exhale activates the vagus nerve, which directly triggers parasympathetic dominance, lowers heart rate, and initiates the cortisol decline that the screen was preventing. Research published in Frontiers in Human Neuroscience confirmed that slow-paced breathing exercises performed in the pre-sleep period produced measurable reductions in sympathetic nervous system activation and heart rate variability improvements consistent with cardiovascular recovery. Do this tonight. Not next week, tonight. Rule 3. If you use any screen in the evening, use blue light blocking glasses from 2 hours before bed and enable the warmest available night mode on every device. This does not eliminate the content-triggered amygdala activation, but it substantially reduces the cortisol suppression pathway by removing the wavelength the eye's blue light receptors respond to. Blue light blocking lenses that filter wavelengths below 500 nanometers have been shown to preserve evening melatonin levels at a significantly greater rate than unfiltered screen use. This is a harm reduction measure, not a replacement for screen cessation. Use it as a bridge while building the 90-minute boundary habit. Order the glasses or enable night mode tonight. Not next week, tonight. Rule 4. Ask your doctor for a 24-hour ambulatory blood pressure monitor and request the nocturnal average specifically. If you have been using screens within 2 hours of sleep regularly for more than 6 months, your daytime blood pressure control may be masking an overnight non-dipping pattern that your morning readings cannot reveal. The nocturnal average, the mean blood pressure during sleeping hours, is a more reliable predictor of cardiovascular event risk in adults over 60 than any office reading. If your nocturnal average is higher than your daytime average, the pre-sleep window is the starting point for investigation. Request this test tonight. Not next week, tonight. Rule 5. Replace true crime, thriller, or news documentary content with audio-only content that does not engage the visual cortex or the amygdala. The issue with long-form narrative content, even slow-paced documentary material, is that sustained narrative suspense maintains cortisol at an elevated level through the mechanism of unresolved tension. The brain stays alert because the story is not over. Audiobooks of nonfiction descriptive content, nature soundscapes, or guided body scan meditations produce parasympathetic activation rather than sympathetic maintenance. The shift from visual narrative to audio-only non-narrative content in the pre-sleep period removes both the blue light pathway and the amygdala activation pathway simultaneously. Make this substitution tonight. Not next week, tonight. How many nights a week do you watch television, scroll your phone, or use a tablet within an hour of sleep? Tell me in the comments. Share this with someone who watches the news in bed every night and has been told their blood pressure is well managed because their morning reading is not measuring the window where the damage is being done. In the next video I am publishing, I am covering the 5 morning habits that compound the overnight cardiovascular damage from the evening window described today. And one of them is something that nearly every adult over 60 does before they have even spoken a word. You will want to see that before tomorrow morning. This is Dr. Nicole Harper. Take care of your heart, especially during the hours you cannot watch over it yourself.